leave a message after the tone.
I understood that the true catastrophe of my life was not the fortune I had lost, nor the name the headlines had made a warning of. It was that a woman I had spent 7 years failing to deserve had just told me, gently and without cruelty, that she still loved the man I had been, and that the man I had become had cost her the chance to keep him. There is a particular arithmetic to public ruin that no one warns a man about in advance, namely, that it does not end. I had imagined, in whatever foolish corner of myself still believed in endings, that there would come a single terrible day, a verdict, a headline, after which the worst of it would be behind me, and I would be permitted to begin the slow work of becoming someone smaller and more honest. I understand now that ruin does not arrive as a day. It arrives as a season, patient and thorough, as it does not conclude so much as it simply moves on to consume something else, leaving you standing in the wreckage, wondering why you are still being asked to answer for a fire that has already burned everything it came for. I will not recount to you the particulars of that season, the depositions, the further headlines, the slow public dismantling of a name I had built with my whole foolish life. I have decided in the writing of this that some of it belongs to rooms I no longer have any wish to enter again, even in memory. I will only tell you that by the 14th night of my conversation with Ren Calloway, I had become, in the eyes of the world, something closer to a cautionary tale than a man, and that this troubled me a great deal less than it ought to have, because I had discovered, quite by accident, that I no longer needed the world's good opinion in order to feel that a day had been worth living. I needed only the 4 after midnight and the sound of her voice arriving into it. But a man does not spend 7 years away from a woman without leaving certain instincts intact, and mine, sharpened rather than dulled by a decade of reading rooms for what they would not say aloud, had begun to notice the particular shape of what Ren was withholding from me. It was not large in the way a lie is large. It was larger in the way a held breath is large, present in every pause, every too careful turn of a sentence, every place where her voice slowed just slightly before choosing its next word. Like a woman walking across a floor she alone knew to be unsound in one corner. I noticed it first in small things. She would speak of the years as a single, undifferentiated stretch, rather than as the specific, textured chapters she gave to everything else. The garden, the 2 moves, the rose that took 3 years to flower. I noticed that she had, in 11 nights of conversation, never once used the word alone to describe any of it, though she had used words like quiet and careful and full in ways that seemed to circle alone without ever landing on it. And I noticed, most of all, that whenever I asked her what a Sunday looked like for her now, an ordinary enough question, the sort of thing one asks to picture a life rather than interrogate one, her answer would arrive shaped, however gently, around the edges of a presence she never named. You keep almost telling me something, I said, on the 14th night, into a silence that had gone on a beat too long, even for us. I have noticed it for some nights now, Ren. and I find I can no longer pretend I haven't. I am not asking to corner you. I am only asking because I find the not knowing has become its own kind of ruin, laid gently over the top of all my other ones. She did not answer immediately. I could hear in the quality of her silence that she was deciding something. Not whether to tell me, I understood later, but simply when, and I had, without meaning to, forced the calendar of that decision forward by several nights she had not yet been ready to give up. I have been trying to decide, she said finally, whether you have earned the right to what I'm about to tell you. I want to be honest, Julian. I am not certain that you have. I am not certain any man earns this exactly. Even one who has spent 2 weeks proving to me, night after night, that some part of him is still worth loving. I have decided to tell you anyway, not because you have earned it, but because I find I am tired of carrying it alone in a conversation that has otherwise had no room left in it for anything unsaid. My chest had gone tight in a way I did not yet have language for. The particular wordless dread of a man standing at a door he spent 2 weeks asking to be let through, only to realize in the instant before it opens that he no longer knows if he wants to see what is on the other side of it. Then tell me, I said, and my voice did not sound entirely like my own. Whatever it is, I have lost a fortune and a name in the space of a month, Ren. I find I am no longer afraid of losing things. I am only afraid of not knowing them. You say that now, she said quietly. I want you to remember when I am finished that you said it. I do not think you understand yet what it costs to know some things, Julian. I think you have spent so long believing that knowledge is always the more honest choice, that you have never once had to sit with a truth you cannot undo the knowing of. Ren, I'm getting there, she said, and I heard, for the first time in 2 weeks, something in her voice tremble, not the careful trembling of a woman choosing words with precision, but the raw kind, the kind that arrives when precision has finally run out. I need you to let me say this the way I had practiced saying it in my own house, alone, for longer than I am proud of. I need you not to speak until I am finished. Can you do that much for me after everything else you have failed to do? Yes, I said, I can do that much. And so she told me. The June after you left, she began. I did not know for the first several weeks that anything in my life had changed beyond the obvious, enormous absence of you. I told myself the tiredness was grief. I told myself the rest of it was grief too, for longer than a sensible woman should have been able to tell herself that. By the time I understood what grief was standing in for, it was already a settled fact, rather than a decision I still had the luxury of making. I want you to understand, Julian, that this is not a story about a choice I made instead of you. By the time I understood what was happening, there was no longer a version of events in which you were part of the choosing at all. I did not speak. I had promised her I would not, and some last, uncorrupted decency in me held to that promise, even as every other part of me strained against it, because I had already begun. in the space between her sentences to understand the shape of what she was building toward. The way a man standing on a shore understands the shape of a wave some seconds before it reaches him, with just enough time to be afraid and none at all to move. I have a daughter, she said. She will be 6 in the autumn. Her name is Iris, for the flower, and a little for the eye, and a little, though I did not admit this to myself for the first 2 years, for you, for the particular color your eyes go in low light, which I have never once managed to forget, however hard the forgetting of you might otherwise have gone. The room around me had gone very still, in the particular way a room goes still around a man who has just been told something that rearranges the entire shape of the years he thought he understood. She is yours, Julian, Ren said, and her voice, saying it, was steadier than I think either of us expected it to be, as though the sentence, once finally spoken aloud after 6 years of private rehearsal, had been simpler to release than to carry. There is no gentler way to arrive at that sentence, and I have decided, after 6 years of trying to find one, that I no longer intend to look for it. She is yours. She has your stubbornness and your particular way of going quiet before saying something enormous, and she has never once in 6 years asked me for a father, because she has never known there was a specific man missing, rather than simply a shape of family she does not have. I did not tell you, Julian, not out of cruelty, and not, I think, entirely out of anger, though there was anger in it at the beginning, more than I have ever told anyone. I did not tell you because I watched for 6 years what ambition did to the man I loved. And I decided, alone, in a hospital room with no one else's name on the forms, that I would rather raise a daughter without a father than watch a father teach her that a room full of strangers' approval is worth more than the people already sitting at your own table. I found, when I finally spoke, that my voice had reduced itself to something barely above the register of breath. Ren, I'm not finished, she said, gently, but with an iron beneath the gentleness that I had never once heard from her before. Not even at the very worst of our old arguments. I need to finish, Julian, because if I stop now, I do not think I will ever manage to say the rest of it. I have watched you these 2 weeks become something closer to the man I remember from the fire escape than the man the headlines describe. And I will not pretend that has not moved something in me I thought long settled. But I need you to understand what you are asking to walk into. If you are asking for anything beyond these phone calls, you would not simply be returning to me. You would be arriving for the first time as a father to a 6-year-old girl who has built an entire understanding of her own family without you in it. At the exact moment your name has become a thing strangers say with a curled lip in supermarkets and school parking lots. I have spent 6 years protecting her from one kind of ruin. I do not know yet if I am willing to introduce her to another kind, however much I have come against my better judgment to love the man on the other end of this phone. I sat with the whole of it for a long moment. The child I had not known existed. The years I had not known I was missing. The particular cruelty and mercy arriving together of discovering that I was a father to a girl who shared my stubbornness and had never once wondered where I had gone, because she had never known there was a where to wonder about. I thought of the fire escape and the empire I had told her I would build, and I understood with a clarity that arrived like cold water down the length of my spine, that I had spent a decade building a name loud enough to be remembered by rooms full of strangers, while a daughter with my own eyes had spent 6 quiet years growing up entirely without needing to remember me at all. Say something, Ren said, after a silence that had gone on long enough to frighten her. I think more than my silence ever had before. Julian, please. I have carried this alone for 6 years. I find I do not know how to carry the quiet after telling it. I am trying, I said, and found that my voice had broken somewhere in the trying. To become, in the space of a single breath, a man worthy of a sentence I did not know I was owed the right to hear. I do not know how long that will take, Ren. I do not know if it is even possible for a man who spent a decade failing at every ordinary thing to become adequate to this in any reasonable span of time. I only know that I would like to try, if you will let me, more than I have wanted anything in the whole ruined length of my life. More, I think, than I ever wanted the empire I burned everything else to build. That is not nothing, she said quietly, but it is not yet enough either. I need you to understand that, Julian, before this goes any further tonight. Wanting to try is not the same as having earned the chance to. Then tell me what would be enough. I said. I will spend whatever is left of this ruined life finding out. If you will only tell me where to begin. She was quiet for a long time before she answered, and in that silence I understood that we had arrived at last at the true center of everything the last 2 weeks had been circling. Not the empire, not the ruin, not even entirely the old love between us, but a 6-year-old girl with my eyes and my stubbornness, sleeping in a house I had never seen, entirely unaware that the whole shape of her family had just quietly, terribly begun to change. Begin, Ren said finally, by understanding that I am not offering you forgiveness tonight, Julian. I am only offering you the truth. What you build with it is going to have to be enough on its own to earn whatever comes after. I did not sleep the night she told me about Iris, and I have come to understand in the weeks since that I did not truly sleep again in any way that mattered until I had said everything I am about to write down for you now. There is a particular insomnia that visits a man, not because his mind will not quiet, but because it has, for the first time in his adult life, become entirely clear about what it wants, and clarity of that kind is its own species of restlessness. I wanted my daughter. I wanted her with suddenness and a violence that frightened me. The way a starving man is frightened by the size of his own hunger once food is finally set in front of him. I called Ren the following night, convinced, with the particular arrogance of a man who has only just discovered humility and not yet learned to trust it, that wanting a thing enough might be sufficient to earn it. I want to meet her, I said, before Ren had even finished saying hello, because I had rehearsed the sentence so many times that it had worn a groove in me and needed only the smallest pressure to come sliding out. I do not ask to be introduced as anything grand, Ren. Not father, not yet. Not until I have earned the word properly. I only ask to be permitted into a room she is in. I will sit in a corner of it, if that is what you require. I only find I cannot bear any longer the thought of a daughter of mine growing one day older without my having once seen her face. Ren was quiet for a long moment, and in the quality of that silence I understood, with the particular dread of a man who has said too much too quickly, that I had once again mistaken the size of my wanting for a claim on the world's cooperation with it. Julian, she said finally, gently but with an edge beneath the gentleness that I recognized now as the same iron I had heard the night she told me everything. I need you to listen to what you just said, and then I need you to listen to what I am about to say, and I would like you to try, for once, to hear both sentences as they actually are, rather than as you wish them to be. I am listening. You said you cannot bear the thought of her growing older without you having seen her face. Not without her having a father. Not without you being present in her life in any of the ordinary, difficult, daily ways a father is present. You said you cannot bear it. That is a sentence about your bearing, Julian. It is not yet a sentence about her needing. The words landed in me the way cold water lands on a man who believed, wrongly, that he had already been standing in the coldest part of the river. That is not fair, I said, though even as I said it, I could feel the protest thinning in my own mouth. becoming less a defense than a question I was asking myself aloud. It is not meant to be fair, Ren said. It is meant to be true. I have watched you for 3 weeks now, Julian, fall in love with the idea of a daughter with your eyes and your stubbornness. I understand that love. I do not doubt it is real. In whatever way anything you feel is ever entirely uncomplicated by the wanting beneath it. But I have spent 6 years learning the difference between a man who wants to be needed and a man who is prepared to do the needing. The mornings, the fevers, the years of ordinary Tuesdays that do not photograph well and do not make a redemption story, and do not, Julian, ever end. I am not asking whether you love the idea of her. I am asking whether you are prepared to become, for the rest of your life, the kind of unremarkable, endlessly present thing a father actually is. And I do not think, if I am honest with you tonight, the way I promised myself I would always be from here on, that you yet know the answer to that question yourself. I could learn, I said, and heard, even as I said it, how much it sounded like every other enormous promise I had made across the whole ruined length of my life. You could, Ren said. I believe that you could, Julian, given time, and given a version of your life that no longer has a name to rebuild, or a room full of strangers left to impress. But I am not willing to let my daughter be the providing ground for whether you have finally become that man. She has already built an entire life without a father-shaped hole in it. I will not tear that down on the strength of 3 weeks of beautiful phone calls, however much those calls have meant to me, however much I have, against every sensible instinct left in me, fallen in love with the sound of you becoming honest again. I sat with that for a long time, the phone warm against my ear, the house around me as still as it had been every night for a month, and something in her voice, in the particular steadiness with which she had said it, made me understand slowly and with a grief I had not expected to arrive quite this early, that she was not merely protecting Iris from me. She was, gently and without cruelty, showing me something about myself I had not yet had the courage to see on my own. Ask me the real question, Ren said quietly into the silence I had left her. Not whether you love the idea of her, Julian. Ask yourself whether you would still want this, the fevers, the ordinary Tuesdays, the years with no audience in them at all. If there were no redemption in it, if no one would ever write about the ruined man who became, quietly, a good father, if the only witness to the whole unremarkable effort of it were her and me, and no one else ever knew. I opened my mouth to answer quickly, the way I had answered everything quickly for the whole of my adult life, and found, for the first time in longer than I could remember, that the quick answer would not come. I sat instead in the true weight of her question, and felt it work through me the way a diagnosis works through a man who has been, until that moment, congratulating himself on his health. I do not know, I said finally, and it cost me more to say than any other sentence in this whole account. I want to tell you that I would, Ren. I want it so badly that I can feel the wanting sitting in my chest like a stone. But I find, asking it honestly, the way you have asked me to, I do not know if I want to be her father, or if I only want to no longer be a man who left one thing and then lost lost everything else, and have this be the single, clean redemption at the end of the story. I do not know how to separate the two wants from each other. I am not certain tonight that I ever will. That, Ren said softly, is the most honest thing you have said to me in 3 weeks, Julian. I want you to know that I am not saying any of this to punish you. I think if things had gone differently, if you had come to this honesty 7 years ago, or even 3 weeks ago, before I had already built an entire understanding of what my daughter's life is going to look like, I think we might have found our way to something neither of us has to grieve. But I do not think a man discovers in a single conversation whether he wants to be needed for reasons that will never be witnessed by anyone but a child too young to thank him for it. I think that takes years to discover, the same slow way it takes years to build a garden. And I do not have years left over to give you for the discovering. I gave those years to her alone already. I understood in that moment with a clarity that arrived like the last cold light before a house goes entirely dark, that she was not asking me a question at all. She had already answered it quietly for both of us, and had only been waiting with a patience I did not deserve, for me to arrive at the same answer on my own, so that I would not be able to tell myself later that she had taken this from me. She was letting me hand it to myself. Then tell me, I said, what I am allowed to be, if not her father, if not yet anything at all. I don't know, Ren said, and for the first time that night, I heard something in her voice give way, not to anger, and not entirely to grief, but to a tiredness that seemed to hold both of those things and something gentler besides. I think for now you are allowed to be a man who knows she exists and who carries that knowledge carefully, the way you once told me you would carry small things. I think someday, if you become the kind of man capable of unremarkable, unwitnessed work I described, there may be a door that opens further than this. I cannot promise you that door, Julian. I can only promise you that I will not close it out of spite, the way I might once have wanted to. I am only asking you not to knock on it until you already know for certain, without needing me or her to tell you exactly why you want it open. I want to speak now, for the first time in this account, not to Ren, but to a daughter I have never seen and may, if I am as honest with myself as this whole ruined season has finally taught me to be, never meet in any way that matters. I do not know if you will ever read these words, Iris, or hear them spoken in some later, gentler year when your mother judges you old enough to be told the shape of the man who gave you his stubbornness and his particular way of going quiet before saying something enormous. I want you to know that I loved the idea of you with a suddenness that frightened me, and that I have spent the weeks since discovering that loving an idea is the easiest, cheapest thing a man like me has ever done, and that I am not yet certain I am capable of the harder, quieter thing your mother has spent 6 years doing every single unremarkable day. I hope if you ever wonder about the absence where a father might have been, that you will understand it was not indifference that kept me from your door. It was, in the end, a terrible and belated honesty. The first entirely selfless thing I have ever managed to do, arriving far too late to look so unavoidably was. Another leaving. I think, I said to Ren when I spoke again, that I understand now what you have been trying so carefully to show me. I came to this call wanting to be let in. I find I am leaving it understanding that the wanting was never truly about her at all. It was about needing somewhere left in the wreckage of my life to be forgiven. I am sorry, Ren, not for asking, for not knowing until you made me look, that the asking was its own kind of taking. I know, she said, and her voice saying it held no triumph in it at all, only a quiet, exhausted grief, the sound of a woman who has just watched a door close in exactly the place she always suspected it would. I think some part of me hoped, Julian, foolishly, that you might prove me wrong tonight. I find I am not surprised that you didn't. I find instead that I am only tired in the particular way a person is tired after carrying a hope for far longer than the hope ever deserved to be carried. Will you tell her about me? I asked. Someday, whatever it is you decide to say. Someday, Ren said, when she is old enough to ask the right questions, and I am confident I can answer them without giving her a wound shaped like the one I carried for 7 years. I will tell her there was a man who loved an idea of her very much for a little while, and who was honest enough in the end to know the difference between loving an idea and loving a person, and to leave before he could teach her to mistake the two the way he once did. That is a kinder account of me than I have earned. Perhaps, she said, or perhaps it is only the truest one. The truth is occasionally kinder than we expect it to be, once we stop being afraid of it. A long pause, and then quieter, in a voice that had already begun, I think, to close the last of its doors. Goodbye, Julian. I do not say that with anger. I do not think I have any left. I think I used the last of it 7 years ago on that fire escape, watching you decide to become someone I could no longer keep. I find tonight that I am only grieving for the man I once loved without complication, and for the version of this call that might have ended differently in some other life, where you arrived at your own honesty a little sooner, or I never had to learn to stop waiting for you to. The line went quiet, not abruptly, but the way a room goes quiet when someone has left it gently, without slamming a single door behind them, so that the silence afterward feels less like an ending than like the exact permanent shape a life has finally irreversibly settled into. I sat for a long while in that silence, in a house too large for the one man left inside it, and understood at last that I had spent the whole of this ruined season searching for a door back into a room I had left 7 years before, and that the door, when I finally found it, had already been closed by a far steadier hand than my own, long before I ever thought to knock, and would not, this time, be open again by anything I had left to offer it.